Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am so excited today to kick off Women's History Month with my guest. Oh, I have to hit go live over here on Instagram. Go live. And we're going to uncover the rich halal traditions with Yvonne Maffei just before Ramadan starts this weekend. So I'm excited to chat with you. So hello, Yvonne. How are
Hello,
you?
Tracy. Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited to do this with you.
I know, and we were connected like 3 or 4 years ago from our friend Sally,
Yes.
and just reconnected in
I,
January. So
Thank you so much for reaching out. That was so great to hear from you. And then you had all these great ideas about reconnecting on Ramadan. So,
yeah, I'm so excited. And actually, and I have to thank my friend um Allison, because she sent me a question about, hey, I've got some people who requested halal at my meeting, and what do I do? And and that's how I reached out to you. So
yes.
Allison, thank you, and Sally, thank you. So
Yeah.
okay, so you are, and for everybody to know, Yvonne is an internationally recognized chef. She's an author, a recipe developer, a writer, and an advocate on the global halal industry. She's a researcher on the Mediterranean diet, global food and water security, and a lover of all things related to olive oil. So that's the premise of this thing. But we're going to talk a premise of who she is. But we're really going to talk about what she does, what halal is, and as we approach Ramadan, because I know it's when we plan meetings. I think the statistic I heard years ago was that there's only 84 days in the year that, or if even that don't have a religious holiday on them or a government holiday on them, and we can't plan all of our meetings around that. So when we do have meetings that fall on Ramadan, I want people to understand what that means, and so we're going to have her help us do that. So, Yvonne, will you tell the audience about what you do and what inspired you to do it with My Halal Kitchen?
Wow. Well, it goes back quite some time now. It's hard to believe that almost 15 years have passed since I've started this. I can't believe, the time just flew. We don't remember when blogs weren't a thing, and then they were all of a sudden, and people started writing about food. And that's kind of what I did in 2008. I started a blog called My Halal Kitchen because I saw that people weren't really talking about halal food and recipes. And I'd always been a foodie. I mean, I guess that wasn't really a term back then, but I grew up in an Italian and Puerto Rican family in the Midwest in Ohio. But food was such a big part of my life. And, we don't think about it. It is what it is. And it was normal to me. Of course, when I left home and went off to school, then you realize that you've really got to learn your culture, your food, and so on and so forth. But in those years of before starting the blog, I became Muslim, and I was around 27 years old. I became Muslim and adopted the diet of halal food and a lifestyle. And what it means is that I stopped eating pork and having anything alcohol related, whether it's food, or just straight consumption of alcohol or in food. That can kind of pose a problem with certain cuisines that I grew up with and that I love. So I started the website to show people that you could make halal food with substitutes, like Italian food with substitutes for the alcohol or the pork. So that was sort of for the Muslim community to kind of learn how to make authentic global cuisine, but also for everyone else who kind of didn't understand what halal was and maybe was a little, taken aback by it, or like, what is that? Or it's weird, or it's strange, or, all kinds of things related to the unknown. I wanted to sort of, literally unveil what this means for everybody. And so I sort of see myself as that person in the middle who can explain to both sides what's going on. I can't hear you. Your mic's off.
Oh,
there you go.
Sorry. I mean, I find it fascinating that you grew up eating Italian and Puerto Rican, and then you're taking those flavors that you grew up with and then converting them to halal, and it's allowing so many more people to understand 3 different types of cuisines in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really fortunate growing up because my parents were, they weren't interested in only eating their cuisine. And also, I grew up in
Mhm.
a town where there were lots and lots of people from around the world. Small town in Ohio, but it attracted people from, Greece and Poland and Hungary. So we would have these international festivals every year, and my parents would take me, and I would try everything from pierogies to souvlaki to everything. I mean, they exposed me to everything. And so I grew up with a love for global cuisine. And so when I became Muslim and I met people in my community who had never tasted an authentic Italian lasagna or a Mexican taco, or I was like, wait a minute, we got to change this. And all it was just kind of figuring out, the right flavor profiles for the
Mhm.
substitutions. So then that led me into a whole new career of recipe testing and development of, getting things to the most authentic flavor that I could, while keeping recipes as traditional as possible. Because I really, I'm a purist. That's the funny part, is that I'm really a purist when it comes to tradition and traditional
Uh-huh.
foods, but I also want to enjoy everything. So that was my
Right.
driving force. Like, I want to eat this. And so I'm going to figure out how to make it happen and share that with others so they can too. And in the meantime, explain to, the people who are not eating halal and maybe don't understand our way of life um, that this is an inclusive thing. This is trying to bring everyone to the table. That,
Right.
I can enjoy a French meal, but it's halal, and it hopefully wouldn't offend anybody who's, saying, well, you eat halal, but that means you can't have French food. No, that's not true. We can make it that way. There's,
Right.
it was sort of me kind of figuring out the compromise to
Right.
make culinary diplomacy or something.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, even when Allison called and then I called and asked you, you're like, well, we just need to go to the grocery store and buy these couple of items and you can make what they're serving already. You can make it halal.
Yeah.
So it's somewhat that simple in
It
some
is. It
respects.
is. The questions I most often got, and it was from my family, first of all, was, well, okay, so that now that you're eating halal, you have to eat Middle Eastern food. Does it have to be like kebabs and shawarmas? And and they were sort of taken aback, but they were serious, because that's their their mindset was halal equals Middle Eastern food, or maybe
Right.
Indian or Pakistani food. And then I thought, oh, I wasn't thinking that, but that was their notion. So it made me understand where they were coming from, and it really made the whole thing more important for me to sort of focus on anything that was not traditionally seen as coming from a Muslim country, because I
Right.
wanted people to. So in my second cookbook, I really focused on American food, Latin food, Italian, French, and Asian, because those were the cuisines that people really don't associate with being halal, but
Right.
make them all halal. So it's an interesting way of kind of
Yeah.
getting everybody together and not having this
Right.
separation of, Muslims, non-Muslims, halal, not halal. Because now, and all these years later, people are enjoying halal food in many forms, and
Right.
it's delicious, it's tasty, it's made that way. It's become, in the beginning, it wasn't this way. In the beginning, it was
Right.
just this unknown, and people,
Right.
we had people who were like questioning so much about, what do you do with the meat and things like that. And
Right.
um and still we have those questions, but it's not as contentious as it used to be. Now there's a lot
Okay.
of people doing it, and mostly in food trucks.
Well, it also reminds me of a conversation I had with Amelia Eckes, who works in corporate dining, and
Mhm.
at one of her clients years ago, she she got permission to buy all halal meats to
Mhm.
serve in except for the pork items. Everything that they served in that corporate dining facility was made halal because of the way they did it, so they could meet the needs of everybody that worked at that company. And
Mhm.
so kind of that same kind of premise that you just talked about. It's
Yeah.
just rethinking some things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting that when I did my book tours, I had more of the non-Muslims showing up to understand halal than Muslims coming to kind of celebrate what is halal or in the cookbook. It was so
Uh-huh.
fascinating. I'm so glad that happened, because people were really interested in, well, what does this halal thing mean? And when they
Mm-hmm.
understood it, let's say from a more scientific point of view, like the benefits of doing things in a halal way, uh,
Mm-hmm.
scientifically, hygienically, um, for the animal, in terms of the humanity of the sacrifice, things like that. When they really
Mm-hmm.
understood those things, they were okay with it. Most people, I never had anybody say, "Oh, I don't." Actually, most people were like, "Oh, so I I'm going to look for halal when I go to the grocery store."
Right.
Because when you kind of separate, I mean, for us, it is a divine religious injunction. Like that's why we do it as Muslims. But we also see that there's a lot of so many scientific benefits to it. So, for us, it's faith and then science. But for a lot of people, they see that, oh, well, it makes sense to do certain aspects of it, and it could be healthier, more transparent.
Right.
They can come up with their own conclusions. But most of the
Right.
time, people have come to me and said, you know, I will look for halal, and I'll be okay with halal if it's served,
Right.
because it's nothing, it's just about giving information and teaching,
Right. Yeah.
what it is. It is what it is, and explaining. But I think before, many years ago, people weren't talking about it, as much.
Right.
It was something that Muslims understood, but it wasn't really talked about outside. Now, it's so much different, thankfully.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Before we go further, my next question, I want to say hi to Lindsay and Kevin and Robert and one other person on Instagram. So thank you for joining. And we do have the first question that came in, and we're going
It's okay.
sorry for my background. We're working from home. Came in from a Facebook user. Because we're jumping into Ramadan here, but really how to be inclusive at meetings during Ramadan when there are speakers at meals. So I want to jump into that question first, and then I really want to touch on what is halal mean so people understand it, if we can do that in a
Sure.
short
Sure.
fashion. But
Yeah, so the workplace during Ramadan is a really important topic, and I'm so glad it's being addressed. Thank you, because um, Muslims are fasting during the month of Ramadan. Right? Ramadan is it's a month in the Islamic calendar. It's the ninth month of the
okay.
Islamic calendar. So Muslims will follow a lunar calendar. Of course, we follow the other calendar, but at home we pay attention to these things. And Ramadan comes at a different time every year because it's lunar. The calendar is lunar, so
Okay.
it doesn't come the same time this year as it will next year. Like this year, it's coming around this Sunday actually,
Yeah.
and we pay attention to the phases of the moon, and our prayer times, which are 5 times a day, are based on this calendar, this daily calendar. And so
Okay.
when in Ramadan, the thing that's most known about it is that we're fasting the entire month of
Right.
Ramadan. What does that fasting mean? It means nothing to drink and nothing to eat, but only during certain times of this day.
Okay.
So before sunset, just before sunrise and until sunset. So we have
Okay.
calendars at home that tell us exactly when the sun rises per location and when the sun.
Okay.
So for me, versus somebody even 2 states away, it's different. It's a different time, or a couple of cities away, it could be a slightly different time.
Okay.
So before sunrise could be, let's say 4:30 in the morning. So we have to have a little meal, or we should have a little meal very, very early to eat
Right.
a little something, drink a little something before that time cuts off, and we stop
Okay.
eating, stop drinking, and then we go the whole day, not even a sip of water, until the sun sets, at the exact
Wow.
moment the sun sets. So everybody knows. Believe me, in Ramadan, everybody knows the exact time the sun sets. Wherever you are, 5:32 or 5:33. Be sure that you're accurate, because we're hungry. But and
Right.
then break the fast with a sip of water or something to drink,
Okay.
and usually a date, but that's more tradition than it is like must be. So
Okay.
when you're in a meeting and there's food, and someone who's Muslim, visibly Muslim or not, refuses to eat politely, they're they're okay. Like, don't feel sorry for them, or don't feel that they're fine with it. They, chose to do this. And you can eat in front of them. Like, most people, I think, feel like, oh, I don't
Oh
want to eat
yeah.
in front of them.
Hmm.
But we're used to it. It's totally fine. Um, because I mean, it's the work day. There's nothing. We don't expect everybody to be fasting along with us, right? It's fine.
Right.
Now, if a meeting runs past sunset, as it does, like, let's say in the summertime, right? Sunsets.
Right.
Or sorry, in the winter, the
In the
sun sets
winter.
earlier. I've been in classes and meetings where, it's time to break my fast. Now, someone's not going to get up and go have a meal, but they might get up and want a glass of water, or have a little something in their purse or bag to eat
Right.
something, and then take a break to pray, and then go and eat. So the day is very structured for Muslims, but the fasting is pretty cut and dry. Like, there's
Right.
nothing going on until the sun sets. But I think that just the acknowledgement that someone's fasting it goes a long way. But
Right.
but I would say that that alone will make people feel a lot more at ease. But they don't.
Right.
Most Muslims, they're not going to want to make you feel uncomfortable or awkward over
Right.
their fasting.
Well, okay. So, and that person that asked is Joan. And then Nancy just followed up with this comment in 2014. The general chair for the conference was observing Ramadan, and some of the attendees. And so they worked with the hotel to ensure they could accommodate them at
Mhm.
specific times later in the evening. Yeah.
That's so nice.
And
That's so nice.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think Joan, hang on one second, because Joan wants to know specifically what is now being addressed, the timing of speakers that are critical to hear. So I guess that also comes in with your prayer
Mm.
times, maybe?
So yeah, when the sun sets, we do have a prayer that happens around that
Hmm.
time. So in Ramadan, there's a specific sort of uh, process, I guess you could say. I mean, it's not. What happens is that you break the fast at sunset. With, like I
Okay.
said, like, if you're sitting at a meeting, you're not going to um, usually, like, leave and go have this long elaborate meal, but you are going to try to at least break your fast. It's very important for Muslims to break their fast at the appropriate
Okay.
time. So there's no delaying it. They won't, like, wait 15 minutes to go have that sip of water. They'll do it
Okay.
pretty much on time. Um, and that's just across the board. And then they will need to step out to pray, typically,
Okay.
for 5 minutes or so. And then, in a normal setting, if they don't have to be in a meeting, or don't have to be um, doing something else, they will then, that's the time to go and eat something, to have a little meal. So if there's something really important going on, a lot of people will delay the meal because they have
Right.
to. But if it's not crucial, or they can eat there at the
Right.
table, that's a great time to just give them something to eat, like, a
Right.
sandwich or fruit or something, because obviously they haven't eaten all day. So that's something
Right.
to pay attention to. But other than that, I think we're pretty easygoing about it, especially during really important work things and
Right. Well, and I realized that also this week it's daylight savings time. So that's adding a whole nother, it's
oh,
the same weekend as, yeah.
yeah,
Saturday.
yeah,
Yeah.
that does skew things a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
Ramadan's
So
harder. Yeah. It's harder
Ramadan is harder.
when the days are longer. It's harder.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because now we're going into in the summertime, it's definitely
Hmm.
9 p.m., 9:30
Yes,
to,
yes.
yeah.
And in some places, as you go further north, it's even longer, right?
Right. What do
So,
you do in Alaska when the sun never sets?
oh, so most of the people there, they will go by like, either the closest location to them that has a
Mhm.
reasonable, sunsetting time. They'll
Right.
usually do that, because they can't. The continuous fast is not allowed, so you can't do
Okay.
that. Yeah, you
Oh,
have to.
that's important to know. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a daily thing, remember. So in
Okay.
the evening, when after that meal happens, a couple hours later, people will usually nibble and have other things, and a lot of
Right.
times, Muslims don't tend to get a lot of sleep in Ramadan, because think about it, when you're maybe getting ready to go to bed, we're kind of just having food, and then it's
Right.
sleep, and then you have to kind of get up again very early to have something before you start your fasting day. So I would say
Mhm.
if there's one thing, try to go easy on people who are fasting because you're tired. It's really
Right.
it's an exhausting thing, but Muslims will hide it very well. They tend to really, because you're not supposed to, look like you're suffering. It's not supposed to be. It's
Right.
not intended to make us suffer. It's intended to, to understand, the suffering of people who don't have food, and
Right.
to be appreciative of what you do have, and to have more focus on certain other aspects of life.
Okay.
So that's not the intention, but it is nice if
Okay.
you can take a breather in the middle of the day or something.
Right.
Yeah, during
Now,
office
so,
people try to nap or something.
oh, well, that's a good idea. An afternoon nap is not a bad thing.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about Ramadan some. So talk about halal and the types of food. I know you said no pork and no alcohol.
Mhm.
So what other things because and one hotel chef said to me, or I overheard years ago, is kind of what you're teaching is that, well, we don't have to necessarily get it from a halal caterer. We
Mhm.
can do it if we follow specific practices and make it in the kitchen there. Is that of the essence true, or can you explain halal and what we should be feeding our guests who are practicing?
Sure. So the definition of halal literally means permissible, and in this
Okay.
context, permissible foods. Um, so when it comes to meat, the meat has to. Okay, so we don't. Let's say for example, we don't eat pork. There are other types of meat we don't eat, but they aren't common in Western society. So I'm not going
Okay.
to mention those. And then there's the alcohol. But let's focus on meat for a minute, because let's say we can have chicken, we can have duck, we can have goat meat, lamb, beef, but that's a halal animal. It's a permissible animal, but
Hmm.
it also has to be sacrificed in a what is called the biha manner, and that means that
Okay.
it's ritually sacrificed, so the animal has been properly sacrificed and processed. Um, and that involves a specific way of doing things, very, very similar to the kosher method. Uh,
Okay.
Very minimal pain to the animal. Um, the blood has to be drained out of the animal. So that's not always done in conventional sacrifice of animals. And that's why there's the permissible, and then there's the sacrifice, the ritual sacrifice that has to happen. That's why halal certified meats are very important, because it gives
Hmm.
us assurance that it's been done. If you can't find halal by any means, you can also do kosher.
Okay.
That is allowed if you can't find halal. So you can't just take any chicken from the grocery store, right, and bring it
Okay.
and process it. But if you have a halal chicken, or you know that it's halal, or someone is,
Right.
verified it or certified, is the best way in the case of hotels and things like that, right?
Right.
Um, yes, you can bring it to your kitchen, and as long as care has been taken that it's not mixed with anything else that's not halal, like no
Okay.
utensils have touched it that have been mixed with non-halal beef, for example, or non-halal chicken,
Right.
or pork, obviously, or anything alcohol, any like
Right.
dipped in alcohol sauce or something, and yeah. So it's not that you have to have a separate kitchen, but you just have to have a space where you can ensure that
Yep.
things are not crossing over. So,
Gotcha.
and that a chef or two people are dedicated to kind of like just making sure that that recipe or that dish has been prepared in a halal way. It's enough, really. Uh,
Right.
in my opinion, you don't have to have, a designated halal kitchen to do that. It'd be great, but I think that's not very practical. That's why some places just choose to say the whole thing is halal and make all of it halal, because then they know that if they have a sizable portion of Muslim customers, or
Right.
oh, it's worth it for some people. But in other cases, you don't have to. It's not that complicated. We don't have to make it that
Okay.
complicated. We just have to
Okay.
have assurances. Yeah.
No, and Joan just piped in, then it's like a kosher kitchen where there can be no cross contamination, cross contact. And I
No,
would say the same thing with when you're talking about food allergies as well. You want to make
yeah,
sure that, if you're
exactly,
serving peanuts, somebody's allergic to peanuts, you need to
exactly,
like eliminate that. Yeah.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. Perfect. Um, the well, and that's can make it kind of helpful because going back to my statement about Allison, I think her event was in Charleston and was trying to figure out what to do, for those two people who requested halal,
Mhm.
is finding those meats and making sure that that caterer was providing it in the right manner or finding a restaurant that was going to do the same.
Exactly. Now,
Yeah.
in the case with just a couple of clients or customers that
Hmm.
are halal, you don't have to go and get, tons and tons of meat just to, satisfy two people. You can find a
Right.
source of maybe a local butcher, or even stores like Walmart carry halal now, and you can go
Oh,
and
wow.
get
Okay.
yeah. There's Crescent Chicken, which is in a lot of Walmarts around the U.S. Um, and so it's not like all over the place, but it is more and more available than it
Okay.
was years ago. But there, like if you look up Mediterranean or Middle Eastern markets, almost
Okay.
every town has them nowadays. You will find halal meats that you can
Okay.
go in, order, or just buy. So for small amounts, it works.
Right.
And that's
Okay. All
fine.
right.
Yeah.
That's really good to know. I mean, because that can help some smaller events or
Yeah.
small contingencies of people that request that,
Hmm.
right? Versus like 2 years ago, I planned an event during Passover, and we had one person who was Orthodox Jew traveling for that time, and she had never traveled during Passover before, so we were learning at the same time of what we could serve her,
Right.
right? And so,
It is.
but it was really finding the right person to take care of it.
And I'd also like to add that, the chefs don't have to be Muslim. Some people kind of
Okay.
think, oh, maybe there has to be a Muslim involved, or, a Muslim preparing it. But that's not the case. As long as the products are halal and the process is halal. And that's why I tend to train chefs of all backgrounds. I say, if you can understand how to do halal, you can serve a lot more people, because
Right.
you don't have to be Muslim to prepare the food. It just has to be the right, elements involved.
Elements. Okay. So what is the market for? I mean, I was doing a little bit of research and it seems that people eating halal is growing dramatically. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. And worldwide, the demand for halal is growing into like the projected amounts were in like the trillions. The last of
Oh,
that.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it has to do with a few things. Surely demographics, as
Right.
one thing, population growing, but also people are growing a bit more conservative religiously. But I think it's another thing as well. In my own research, what I tend to find is that more and more people are concerned about their health. And
Right.
more non-Muslims are interested in halal and other ways of eating that give them some idea of transparency. Where is the food coming from? That they can trace
Hmm.
it back, that there's,
Yeah.
maybe a single farm, or care being given to these animals, things like that. Like, I think more and more people care so much about that. And the transparency of halal is what's really giving it the demand, right?
Right.
Because people want to know, like, where's our food
Oh,
coming,
yeah.
you know?
More and more people are really wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is Joan again, but I think this is really important too, because um, Ramadan, Passover, and Easter are all intersect this spring, and that's actually something that happened that week.
Yeah.
I actually really wanted that event that I did where I had somebody who was it was Passover, it was also Ramadan, and I'm like, oh, let me have both people, please, because
I
I really wanted to figure it out,
know. Wow.
and what to serve. But Joan, thanks for pointing that out because that really is important to understand. And even with Lent, like what are you
Yes,
serving on Fridays?
yes,
And
yes. I grew up Catholic, so I know, I remember Friday Lents, and you have Friday fish fries, and abstaining
right.
from certain things during Lent. And so from Ramadan is very similar to that. I mean, that idea of the discipline. But I think it's beautiful when all of these holidays intersect at the same time. And if there's a way that everybody can sort of get together at the table would be amazing, you know?
Right. Oh, exactly.
I'd love
Exactly.
something like that, but
All right. So part of your work is training hotels and chefs. So how are you, have any of them, I mean, they're hotel chefs, right? Or, variety of things. So how have they embraced this? Have you seen, are you getting more requests for that? And do you see that it's the training, and this kind of comes into another question that Joan asked, is it coming to the salespeople as well, not just the chefs, but is it going, filtering down to other people in the hotel or convention center offices that are responsible for selling the menus and helping meeting planners design the menus outside of the chef?
that's a great question. What I have seen recently in the, it's changed over the years. I mean, there's always been an interest, but in the past year or two, it's just exploded in terms of how much demand there is particularly in universities. I did an
Okay.
event at Yale University, and I, speaking to people at Yale Hospitality, but also all these other chefs that were coming from other universities around the country and in Canada. I was just bombarded with questions about, okay, we really want to do this halal thing, and they're intent on creating great recipes, vegan recipes, Mediterranean inspired, Middle Eastern, whatever, but they cannot get the supply. That's the problem.
Okay.
The problem is and what I've been told over and over again is that they can't get enough chicken, they can't get enough
Oh,
beef.
wow.
They can get lamb, but even that,
Okay.
lamb is a little bit more expensive. So the trick is in sourcing, in sourcing, getting a really good supply. And I think what is going to need to happen is that hotels, whether it's hotels, universities, hospitals, are going to have to start looking locally for their supply. They're going to have to start reaching out to farmers who can source them, and that would be such a great thing because the local stuff is can be fresh and
Right.
start supporting. But that's a whole endeavor in and of itself. But I'm just addressing the bottleneck that I see. And
Right.
there's no lack of interest, there's no lack of demand, and
Hmm.
these universities and hospitals and hotels, everybody wants to meet that demand, but we have to get the product right to do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So you can do vegan and you can do vegetarian kind of easier. um
Right.
in the halal sense, there isn't much to deal with except no alcohol, which isn't usually in stuff anyway. But it's the meat. The meat is the biggest
Okay.
issue.
Well, and that goes back to wanting people to eat healthier, and two, wanting to know where their food is coming from, and three,
Yeah,
they want to eat local because
yeah,
it is
yeah,
fresher. And
yeah,
I'm glad that you pointed that out. It does come along with that meat. It's not just, fruits and vegetables,
yeah,
that we're thinking about that
yeah.
as aspect as well.
Would be great to support our local farmers too. I think
Right.
like
Hmm.
we could cross off so many great things by creating programs like that. But that's a whole nother endeavor, which I would love to be part of.
Right.
But in the meantime, I am work. There was a question about addressing the chefs and training. Right,
Hmm.
I can't remember the entire
Yep.
question.
Hmm. Yep.
That is what I do. Is I try to uh, train chefs, whether up and coming chefs at culinary schools or
Hmm.
chefs who are already established in industry and hospitality.
Hmm.
Go in and say, this is how you can easily make things in a halal way. This is
Right.
what you can do in your industrial kitchens to create halal products, dishes for
Right.
your guests, and just give them the simple solutions that it takes to do that, because they
Right.
already have the recipe ideas. They're chefs.
Right.
They don't really
Yeah.
need, once they know they have the tools and information, they can run with it.
Yeah. Well, that's so funny. And I love, so like, I'm just thinking of menus that I've been looking at. I'm like, there's the Italian menu and the buffet and the sandwich buffet, whatever. I'm like, you
Yeah,
can make those all halal.
make everything halal. It doesn't have to be. That's the thing I really wanted people to understand, is that it doesn't have to be Middle Eastern or Asian, South Asian. Those are great and wonderful, and I think people are really into Middle Eastern food right now, which is awesome.
Right.
It's so healthy. But you can have anything. Make
Right.
anything halal. Make your French onion soup, your beef bourguignon, your pasta with meatballs. I mean, I do it all because I can,
Wow.
right? Like this is
Right.
there are easy ways to do it. And I've had chefs say to me, well, I've had French chefs actually say to me, well, how do you substitute the alcohol? And I'll say, well, it's really just simple. I use this, do this, and this to for certain French
Uh-huh.
French dishes and so on. And they'll say, really? I mean, it's not simple, like juices and things like that. Like I've
Right.
just because I just tested over the years how, and
Hmm.
I already knew what they tasted like from my previous life. So
Right.
I was in the perfect position to do that. But it really is that simple. It really is.
Wow.
And I love that because I want people to feel they can hold on to their traditional recipes. They can,
Hmm.
because your food is your culture, your food, it comes, it's all one. And you shouldn't have to give it up just because of a dietary restriction.
Right. Exactly. Oh, I love that. Yeah, you shouldn't have to give it up. I mean, and my friend Martha, who is a food allergy chef, she's the same way. I'm like, she wants to be able to make people eat what they wanted to eat,
Yeah.
in a safe manner.
Yes.
Okay, so Ronnie on LinkedIn here has a question. What can you drink with a halal meal? Is milk yogurt permissible with meat or chicken? So that's kind of that
That's
kosher
a great
question too.
question. Yes, yes, because I understand in kosher that you can't mix milk with meat at least for a couple hours, you know,
Hmm.
between the meals. This is not the case with halal. You can have a cheeseburger. You can have milk or yogurt with meat dishes. So that's a differing. Um,
Hmm.
uh, that's different with between halal and kosher. But most things are so similar. But that is in halal, it's fine.
Okay, good. And this was in a comment. Oh, International Association of Venue Managers needs to have you as one of their meetings. Convention centers are not up to speed, nor are their catering outlets.
Mhm. I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, you and I need to tag team on that. Let's go for that.
Let's
Yes.
do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks for that, Joan. Okay, so Women's History Month. Who has influenced you? What woman, mother, grandmother, other women has influenced you in your career?
Career or cooking?
Or both? Yeah,
Both? Okay.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because I grew up with women who, like grandmothers and mother who, and aunts who, were basically the kids were not allowed in the kitchen, right? It
Okay.
was an adult thing, a mom thing. We were set off to play and do the other thing. But the food was so good all my life that I just thought, I need to learn how to make all this. So
Yeah, how do you learn how to
influence.
make it until you're older,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they were like, "Go study," and, my mom kept saying, "No,
Uh-huh.
go study." I wanted to go to culinary school. My mom, "Go study, go study." But it was just an obsession. Like, I have to know how to recreate what I grew up eating. And so, in a sense, my grandmothers, my mother, they were all influential. I have an aunt who lived in Sicily for most of my youth, and when I went to visit her, she and her husband, my uncle, taught me how to shop for things, how to make traditional Sicilian foods, and that kind of ignited the fire inside of me to cook and to learn
Mhm.
traditional things. So I think it's usually the ones closest to us. But then as I traveled, I think I always gravitated towards grandmothers and women
Mhm.
who were willing to teach the old ways of doing something, whether it was in Mexico or Spain or wherever I would go.
Mhm.
I would gravitate towards some woman who would show me how do you make something
Right.
traditional, and they were always happy to do that. So I feel like in my mind, my teachers and mentors were always those women who gave up their time to show me how to do things. um
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. So
It reminds me of a conversation like during in COVID, and I think it was when a lot of refugees were coming, and it's a gentleman from Canada, Len, and I forgot the name of his place, but it was like all these grandmothers coming in. He gave them a space to make their traditional meals for a month or a week or whatever, and so that because food is how we celebrate and that's the only thing they could bring with them was their recipes.
yes, yes, it's like, I think the topic of food is it's trendy now, right? We
Mm-hmm.
kind of see it everywhere, but I think it's because we're all longing for that something to hold on to. It's the one thing
Mm-hmm.
that maybe people can't take away from you is if you have a dish in your mind, something that's comforting to you, and you can make it on those days you're stressed out or
Mm-hmm.
feeling homesick or whatever. The smell of tomatoes and sauce will forever remind me of my Sicilian grandmother. I mean, it just brings something back. Nobody can take that away from you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that even though she couldn't really teach me her recipes, because if I would ask her, she'd say, "Oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that." But she taught me about what it does to glue the family together, right? That those,
Interesting.
those meals, that
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice, it was her way of saying, you are my tribe, you are my people, you are my world, and this
Mm-hmm.
food is what I do to keep us all together. And that's something that has
Ah,
really made me feel like when I started doing halal and I felt it might separate me from the people that I love because it now became so different. I think
mm-hmm.
that was my driving force for wanting to make sure that I never lost the traditions that I grew up with, or that no one else ever lost traditions just because they kind of changed their diet.
I think that's a really important, really poignant point to make, because whether it's a religious based need or it's a medical need, medical food allergy, etc., just because of that, you don't want to lose that part of you, that food, those memories, etc.
Yeah, food is it's a very, very emotional trigger for people.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it lets
Yeah.
me get a good one, right? Not something.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not a bad one. Yeah. Well, we won't go and talk about bad ones, but
You know.
we don't need to do that. So, what has been your favorite food place in the world to cook and eat? Because you travel all over.
Oh, my favorite place to cook and eat. I guess, it's going to sound kind of corny, but it really is wherever my kitchen is, because
Okay.
that's the place I can cocoon myself away from the world. When the world gets
Hmm.
messy, which it is quite often, um, it's, cooking has always been sort of a therapy for me, not, um, it- it's the one constant I have, I think. And
Hmm.
so I've had many kitchens around the world and at home. And I think when I tend to like fix it up and have the things I need and the ingredients I can sort of create some magic there. So that tends to be, and then I can bring people into my little world the
Hmm.
way that I, and have that thing that my grandmother did, right? Which was to say,
Right.
"You're my people, you're my," and that's
Hmm.
a powerful thing. You can't get at a restaurant. You can't get,
No,
anywhere else. So I feel, you know, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's
it
most people,
does. Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
home is very important to me. And when I bring people into that space, it's saying more than just food's ready. It's saying
Right.
that I love you and I want to
Mm-hmm.
nurture you. I think most people who love food and love cooking and chefs, they have that similar need to nurture. But
Mm-hmm.
um, but I'm grateful that I got that from the women in my
Yeah.
life. You know.
That's awesome. Okay, jumping to a different question, not food or Women's History Month related, but how can meeting planners work with chefs and their catering services managers to better serve their guests who have requested halal? Do you have any suggestions?
Meeting planners working with chefs to
Or
keep.
to how can we incorporate halal into the menus? I mean, is it,
Mhm.
and I guess you kind of addressed it a little bit, saying if it's one or two people go, we can go do this, but is there a way thinking forward, even if there was a larger contingency of people,
Mhm.
how would he do that?
I think communication is really key here. That
Hmm.
a lot of times, like me as a consumer, when I go someplace, if it's not apparent to me that something is halal, I may not even want to ask. I mean, I do ask, but I
Hmm.
feel it's an added step. or if you feel like you have to wait to ask, or maybe you annoy somebody if you ask, so communication, I think, is a really big thing. Like, I've seen in the past where many companies didn't want to announce that they were offering halal. And maybe that was a more political thing or whatever. But that's changing. Thankfully, that's changing. But I think where I'm going with this is that if they can come up with ways to sort of say that they do have halal offerings, like whether it's for wedding planning or business meetings, like we offer halal meals or meats, whatever. Let it be known a little bit more. I think people would really make their choices to have to work with a venue if halal was offered. I don't think that people realize, and this goes with, F&B products as much as it does with venues, is that when halal is offered, you have no idea the positive feedback that you get from the Muslim community and how fast that spreads among the Muslim community. I mean, we're a very viral community in that sense. Like, we talk. When something's halal, I will tell 5 people, and they will tell 5 people, and so it becomes a place that people want to go to, and they'll check and they'll verify, and as long as things are in order, I think to get the ducks in order is really important. Like, get products that are certified, have your SOPs in place to ensure that halal is done right. Work with somebody like that could just, kind of make sure that you're doing it right. That's fine. Nothing too expensive and nothing too grand, but get those ducks in order and then communicate that to the community around you.
Right.
That will just change things. That really will be beneficial.
That's awesome. Well, and that's really part of meeting planner needs to add those to the their SOPs, then to pass them on to the caterer for sure. Okay. Now I'm going to throw a loop on that. Well, what if we're doing a meeting and we have an offsite dinner? Right. And how, I mean,
like at a restaurant?
At a restaurant. Right. So how are we going to, do we have to go find those Mediterranean restaurants instead?
No, not necessarily. No.
Okay.
This is the beauty of halal that I like to talk about, because there's lots of options. Like, you could call let's say you're doing an offsite meeting at a restaurant, and you say to the restaurant, I have somebody who eats halal. Do you know what that means? Or sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If they say, no, we don't have halal meat. Okay, do you have fish? Do you have any? Okay. Now, some Muslims will not eat all kinds of fish, but let's say like shrimp is usually okay, or whitefish is fine, as long as they're not cooked in alcohol. If you just know those couple of things, it's easy. If they say, we don't have any fish and none of our meat is halal, can you give us a robust vegetarian meal? Something that is filling, and it's not going to be like little, smaller meal than everybody else has with meat, right?
Right. Yeah.
Something comparable. There's always a way around this. That's what I guess I'm trying to say, is that you don't have to go to a halal restaurant. You don't have to go to a Middle Eastern restaurant. It doesn't have to be that way. There are ways to do it. I had a friend who took me she's Lithuanian, and she really wanted me to try this European restaurant. And she knows that I'm, eat halal. We've known each other for years. And she said, I know that they have pork and they have other, meats, but I checked and they have tons of seafood things for you. And they have lots of vegetables. And it's true. Like, there was so much meat I couldn't have, but then there were all these other things that she checked out ahead of time just to make sure that I could have something. And, for most people, that gesture goes a really long way.
So, it does.
We're not going to starve. There's plenty of, options.
Right.
Really, there are.
Yeah. And I think that's the tricky part there, is that alcohol aspect of it too, making sure that nothing's cooked with that.
Yeah, because a lot of restaurants, especially the fancier ones, will, they'll say, well, the wine evaporates or the alcohol evaporates. And we don't typically go with that.
No. Yeah. And I have a woman who I plan meetings for, or she's an attendee and a staff person, I should say. And she's violently ill to wine, and she was like, no wine vinegar or anything, and allergic since she was little. So it evaporates. Well, no, it's still in there.
0.02%, something
exactly.
Like that. So it's just better to avoid, and then that just avoids any kind of, issues going forward. I think,
Right.
what people don't realize is just these gestures of trying and trying to make sure just go such a long way for customer service,
Right.
um, for many reasons. But,
Right.
I feel so much more comfortable with people who have just asked or have
Right.
tried. That's just, I mean, hospitality is that way, right? The hospitality
Right.
industry is
Exactly.
incredible. So we
Yeah.
should be good at this.
Exactly. Okay. Two more questions.
Sure.
What experiences have changed you throughout this journey from before eating halal and then now through this 15 years of what you've been doing?
Well, first of all, I think just being in halal itself, and I've had to really understand food science. And when you sort of understand food science, then you start to know what's in your food, and then that leads you down this path of, oh my God, what's in our food? So, what are we doing to our food, and labels. But it's really opened my eyes to what I'm putting in my body, what foods are made of, and
Hmm.
towards that policy, like the food and water security issue. Like it kind of made me much more of a purist, and then trying to help solve the problems of what's in our food. So I went from halal to, like, I mean, it's bigger than halal. Like, we look at halal, we look at ingredients for halal's sake, but then we
Hmm.
go down this rabbit hole of, like, oh my God, what's in our food? But it can be problematic, but it's kind of opened my eyes to, you know, working with people who work on solutions rather than, and not
Right.
just for halal, but what's better for us, what's healthy for us.
Right.
So it's led me to talk on, even more different topics these days on, just health. And that's why I'm so crazy about the Mediterranean diet and food
Hmm.
security and things like that, because we're sort of in a crisis. But
Hmm.
I've learned that there's power of the pen, there's power of, you know, food is a food is such a huge and important topic. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it really is. It is. And somebody, I was at the food tank event on Sunday, and they said, somebody was, the Mediterranean diet with the Southern flair, right? Like
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Southern and because it's
Yeah.
really understanding, it's like you're saying, understanding the Sicilian diet and the Puerto Rican diet and the halal diet, and how do you mesh all of those things, but even the Mediterranean diet with the US Southern diet,
Yes.
mixing those together. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to work with what we have, right? I
Hmm.
think we realize we have to stop, this, unconscious consumption. And so people are
Right.
looking at what's in their backyard versus what's across the
Hmm.
world, and how we
Right.
can, we're getting better at that. So it's a very exciting thing. I think this journey has taught me that things evolve and we evolve. And, I thought I was going to just write about halal food and recipes. And it ended up,
Hmm.
I mean, I ended up wearing so many other hats in the process, but, at times it would drive me crazy. But now back, I think those were all lessons I needed to learn to get to this
Hmm.
point, right? So, um, you know, I never thought I would be, a pioneer advocate for, I never
Hmm.
labeled myself in any of those ways. I just went with what was in my heart. And I think that's the one lesson I realized, is that stick to that, stick to what's in your heart.
That's awesome. Okay, so then I'm going to end on this question: is how do you want to be remembered for the?
Oh, well, I guess I want to be remembered as someone who tried her best to explain something that was misunderstood, and tried to show how, how we could all come to the table from different understandings
Hmm.
and aspects, but that by writing, by teaching, by educating, we could lift a lot of hate, and we could lift a lot of misunderstandings and ignorance about something, and then, you know be happy at the table, and enjoy something at the table. Because I'm really used to, my grandmother used to always say when everybody was upset, like, big families, everybody's arguing about something, whatever. And she would say, "Oh, you guys are just hungry. Sit down and eat." And, and it would work every time. Like you'd sit down, you'd eat, and everybody would forget about what they were arguing about. And it's kind of like that. Like if you just have really good food and explain where someone's coming from, like we all want the same thing. So I
Right.
guess I'd like to be remembered as that person who brought peace to the table in that sense, I guess,
Yep.
that because halal comes with what came with halal in the beginning is a lot different than it is now. And it wasn't easy to unwrap and unpackage it. And, it was at a time when there was a lot of, negativity towards us. But thankfully, it's gotten a lot better. And I'd like to think that I was part of that positive change. I hope. And I hope that I'll be remembered for someone who tried to explain it and bring people together.
That's awesome. You make my heart happy.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And Joan posted in thank you both for this. We have a long way to go in our industry to be inclusive. There's a variety of ways that we need to do that, but I think this conversation will hopefully help that.
Well, thank you for bringing it to the table, Tracy, and letting me talk about this. And, I always feel it's an honor to be able to share our feelings, our stories. And I really thank you for giving me the space to share that.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. And how can I'm so glad that Sally introduced us, and it took a while, but now we're BFFs. I'm just deeming that now. Okay. So I'm going to put on here, everybody, you can reach out to Yvonne at My Halal Kitchen on Instagram, as well as on her website, My Halal Kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you are for hire in a variety of different ways.
Let's do this.
Yes. Oh, actually, and there's 2 more comments on here. Okay. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you both. And thank you. I learned a lot of important things. Wonderful. So thank you so much for that. That's very sweet. Linda, thank you for that. All right, let me hit the hide. Okay. So Yvonne, thank you very much. As I said, you make my heart happy. Everybody, this is Women's History Month. This is the first interview of the month. So we've got some more lined up for you. So stay tuned. I'm here on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock. And until then, stay safe and eat well. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. And happy Ramadan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.